So that was a solo. I had a really fun time transcribing this one. I remember I heard it, about a year ago or so, and as soon as I first heard it, I loved everything about it. Just like the grit, the attitude about it, and of course all the vocabulary in it too is just excellent. It's a very well crafted solo from start to finish. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one. I'm definitely going to keep lifting material, kind of crafting my own from the solo. And then before I dig more into the analysis, I definitely would like to say that for all of you who teach in the future at any point, whether it's through schooling of some sort or private instruction, if you have a student who's looking to get more into, jazz improv, transcription, listening to great players, lifting their own material from it, this definitely would be a fantastic solo to start a student with, especially for sax players. It can be said for anyone, but I know for sax players, there's a ton of just crazy solos out there, especially from all the greats, and the way it was for me, I'm sure it's this way for a ton of players, but it's hard to figure out a place where to start digging in more to transcription, because it does seem so intimidating with a lot of the stuff that like guys like Coltrane or Bird or any of them are putting down. So if you have a student who wants to get more into it but has no clue where to start, this is an excellent solo to kind of put them on a path towards transcription and getting better at ear training overall. But yeah, let's dig right in. So as I said, this tune was 3 o'clock in the morning. This was the Dexter Gordon version, one of the more famous versions of it, I should say. It was actually originally a waltz, though. It was written in 1919 by Julian Robledo. He was a composer and pianist out of New Orleans. A year later, in 1920, it was made for a full jazz orchestrated version by Paul Whiteman. And that's a really cool version. I highly recommend checking it out, but it's a waltz. It's very different from this version. Dexter really took it and made it a hard bop type standard. And then there's other famous recordings of this. Dizzy Gillespie has a great version. Oscar Peterson, Thelonious Monk, and Harry James are some of the more well-known versions of this tune. So looking at the overall picture of this, the form is 32 bars, but it's not a traditional form. It's not, obviously not a blues, it's not rhythm changes. It's, I would break it up as a B, A prime, C form. So there's no real identical sections. They're similar between the A and A prime, but the B and C are pretty different. So it definitely keeps moving forward. And then what's really unique about the structure of this tune compared to a lot of others, like rhythm changes, is that the first 6 measures, by the way, all the files and everything for just a blank solo alone, as well as the solo with analysis done to it, that should be in the files below. So if you look at it, the first 6 measures are all a vamp on the 1 chord. So this really creates kind of a unique texture every time it gets to the A section, because unlike rhythm changes, you're limited to, well, not limited, but you have 1 chord to work with, as opposed to one every 2 beats, like in a rhythm changes. So this can leave a ton of room for creating just interesting harmonic, melodic content. As we've talked about before, like with So What, it's kind of the same idea. It's a 1-chord vamp. You can really kind of explore different colors, different textures, different everything throughout those 6 measures, especially because there's just so much openness. So rather than limiting yourself to one scale or one mode or just playing the chord tones, there's a ton of room to really explore, kind of dig into that. And then throughout the solo overall, it's really a very healthy mix of blues content, hard bop content, and even a touch of bebop content. It doesn't really go too in depth with bebop, but everything, every lick, every type of vocabulary in this is so essential to the hard bop sound, just combining that blues with a very gritty texture, and then adding some chromaticism too definitely makes a lot of flair. Yeah, so one thing that I did notice is like just looking at some bebop, what I meant by that was there's some material in here that is traditional to the bebop language. It's not played as bebop, but it's kind of like traditional bird type language, Charlie Parker. So if you look at measure 5, for example, that's a classic Charlie Parker lick. He has another motif that Parker did all the time on the 5 chord. That is in measure 43 with the chromatic line ascending up and down the chromatic 8th note triplets. That's kind of a essential Charlie Parker lick as well. So you can tell he's been listening to a lot of players before this, and that's the cool thing about Dexter. You can hear a bunch of other guys' licks. I hear a lot of Charlie Parker in his playing, but he obviously does it more in the hard bop style. So I think is really cool. But yeah, a main thing with the solo is he has a lot of kind of repeating gestures, motifs, and development, both rhythmically and melodically. So just one brief area. There's a few I'll go over, but one is just right off the bat, starting in measure 1, with the repeating 8th note gesture on the same note. This is hinted at again in the last 8 measures of the B section of the second chorus, starting at measure 57 on that C6 chord. He does the same thing with the G's, and then he, 2 measures later, does it on D. This definitely shows some sort of hinting towards the initial lick or idea that he played. So he's definitely thinking about little things like that, little nuances, creating more of an interest moving forward. And then another cool gesture that I found, or not gesture, but just a developed idea. If you look at measures 49 through 52, he starts his A prime section of the second chorus with the same pattern but slightly changing it the second time. So starting in 49, ba ba da ba bu da bu da. That's gesture 1, and then gesture 2. He starts it the same, but then he slightly varies it at the end to make it moving forward more so. So then it's bu da ba da ba bu da ba. So by going to that flat 7, it definitely creates a dissonant, bluesy gesture, which definitely helps with the lick after that, moving forward to when it does ultimately change to a C6 chord with the boo-da boo-ba-ya ba-dum boo-doo-ba boo-ba-ya ba-dum ba-da. Sorry, I know that probably wasn't the right pitch. Yeah, so he does a ton of that, just development overall in the solo. And then another gesture that just continually comes up throughout the whole thing is this 3-to-1 pattern. I wrote down all the measures. I'm sure I might be missing some, but I found it starting in measure 19, measure 47, measure 54, 63, 77, 79, and 92. And then he does it as well in C as opposed to G in measure 24. What's interesting about this is that sometimes he approaches it with an enclosure. Like if you do look at measure 19, it starts with an enclosure. He approaches it. It's at the second beat, C to A sharp to B, and then up to G. That's the gesture that I was referring to. And he continually does that, but he sometimes doesn't approach it by an enclosure, but rather he just goes into it, whether it's by stop or by leap. For example, measure 47, he just approaches it as a downward descent. And you'll find this gesture, he really does it mostly kind of at the ends of his phrases. There's occasional moments where he does it in the middle, or connecting kind of two different ideas, but a lot of the time you'll find that it has some sort of rest or ease off the gas pedal the following beat or two. And then, yeah, another big thing throughout the solo is that there are a ton of anticipations, especially at the ends of sections, B and C section, where it has a 2-5 back into 1. A lot of the time he's just kind of implying that it's all G, or rather that it's going to be going to G, as opposed to outlining, the individual A minor 7 to D7 to G. If you look at the second page, you'll see on the analysis copy that I have this written all over. Like measure 45, 46, measure 62, measure 77 through 78. That's what he's continually thinking of. He's thinking more so about what's coming as opposed to what's in the moment, which I think super hip. It definitely makes it grittier and kind of in one tonal center as opposed to all over the place. Like a bebop approach to this might be to play more with each chord, whereas a kind of hard bop, bluesy approach that he's going for, he's mostly just thinking of that type of thing just in concert F or G. I should have prefaced with that. This is a B-flat transcription, not C. So for any of you with perfect pitch, I apologize if you've been beyond confused this whole time. Let's see. Yeah, overall, there's just a ton of bluesy content. It never really goes out. There's an occasional altered moment, such as 26, but again, that could be looked at as like a gestural motivic development, because the measure before, it's a half step above all four notes, and then it goes a half step down, and then ultimately arrives on that E when it returns to the tonic key, so that lands on the 6. But yeah, for the most part, this solo is very much tonal bass. He's very much thinking bluesy gestures, more melodic approaches rather than going crazy harmonically. And then, of course, a ton of chromaticism throughout the entire solo as well. Yeah, I think that's mostly all I got. This was a great solo. I highly recommend you all check it out on your own. Like I said, it is a fantastic place for students to start, I believe. Yeah, that's all I got. I hope you enjoyed, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts.